Hello coders, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're from, good morning in fact, depending on where you are. Today I am going to attempt to build a GitHub pipeline using GitHub Actions. We already have one for the PHP stuff. Here I'm diving into the code quiz API. I've put a link in the chat if anybody wants to contribute and help build this thing. Yes, so what was I saying? This application, this project has three parts to it. First of all, we've got the API itself that's written in Symfony and obviously PHP 8, and then we have the God, trying to think. It's been one of those days. We have the API client. Sure, we have the API client that's written in JavaScript. And we did some of that last week. Then we have the application itself. We haven't built that at all yet. And that will either be a mobile app or it'll be a website or both. Probably be both eventually. Yes. So as this project is going, we've had a couple of contributions already, which is fantastic. I want to make sure that we have a CI pipeline in place. Just to check things like linting, PHP unit testing, and all that stuff. So we have, I'm not even sharing my screen here. There we go. So we have a pipeline for the API. So again, the API is written in PHP. It's a Symfony app. And I took a lot of inspiration from this blog here to get this running. So we have this pipeline where we have a change detection job, and this is what I was doing over the weekend, by the way. So it runs on Ubuntu latest, and it outputs this steps change. So it discovers if there's any change to anything within the API folder, remembering the API folder holds the Symfony application. And then if there is, it marks that, it sets that output to true. And then here we have a check, and I think, yay, one of my dogs has just popped in to say hello. Shut up. You're not going out now, buddy. Yes. So if it's true, then it then runs on Ubuntu latest. What's he doing? What's he up to? It's Goose. He's just come in and just wanted to say hello. Then we have this. It checks out the code. Then it installs Composer. Changes the working directory to the API. Runs Composer install. Then it does PHP CS. Then it does PHP stan. So that's everything I did like over the weekend. There is an after test check as well to check whether the actual job succeeded. There's a dummy step in case it hasn't, and then a final step to check whether it has succeeded, or if it's a dummy step, and then it will tell you whether it's passed or failed. So what I'm thinking is trying to do a similar thing for the API client. That's what I want to attempt to do tonight. If I, hopefully that will work. So at the minute, we only have this API.yaml, and I've just found out that we can actually have multiple workflow files. So I'm thinking of creating an API client file, which kind of mimics this, but I only want it to run if the API client folder is touched. So we may have to change this a little bit, because I really don't want this to run and then discover that none of this is changed. This is the problem. Well, it's not a problem. This is a complication with a monorepo trying to use a CI tool like GitHub Actions. So if we go to the code quiz, the actual thing here, I think he wants to pop out. Bear with me a minute. Out you go. There we go. He realized it was boring in here. It's full of computer geeky techie stuff and no dog food. Yes, so we've got the API here. This is the Symfony application. Okay, this is the Symfony app. And we have, of course, in Composer, we have the PHP checks for, if I can find it, where's required dev. Yes, so we've got PHP stan, we've got code sniffer, and we've got the fixtures bundle and other things, obviously, for a Symfony application. If I come out of this, in our API client, it is a JavaScript application. It's a TypeScript app, and it runs the API client that will be injected into the application. So I'm seeing this as a kind of a module, an npm module that gets included into the application. The reason why I want to separate the two, because I could have created them as one, but the reason why I wanted to separate the two things is that I want to eventually inject this into the main howtocodewell.net site and then utilize the API, because I wouldn't mind capturing the code quiz questions based upon, say, the course that someone is viewing. So that's why I've split this out. So yes, I want to have some form of checks going on here. And if I go to the project, I've created these tasks. So in our to-do column, we've got create the GitHub CI pipeline for the API client, install and configure ESLint, install, I think that's pronounced Axios. I can never pronounce that correctly. And then on the API side, install the API platform. And then there's other bits and pieces as well. There's quite a lot of bits and pieces. Also, if you're interested and you want to actually work on this, then there is, in issues, I have been creating sort of ones with like help wanted. So for example, if you want to, say, install and configure PHP unit, or if you want to add some questions, if you've been following on Twitter or Instagram and you want to populate the fixtures for the CSS or the JavaScript fixtures, then there's also HTML quiz questions that need to be added too. There's other things such as environment variables need to be added to Vagrant, and other things. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back into this. So what we want to try and do is we want to try and work on this one. So we want to try and copy the structure of the API pipeline. And at this stage, I don't want to add any tests to this. I just want to see if the pipeline runs. So if I make a little change to the API client, say, I don't know, a change to a file or a README file or whatever, I want the pipeline to spark off, but I don't want the pipeline for the API to spark off. I only want the API client to spark off. That's the point of this one. So let's just dive in. So this is hash 67. That's the thingamajiggy, the ticket. So let's do checkout -b of 67, and we're looking for API client. We'll do GitHub actions. There we go. Right, so we've created that branch. Let's get rid of this for a minute. In fact, let's just close all this down. Don't need any of that open. Okay, so let's get into our project. And we want to be playing with this tonight, API client. We want to create a workflow, a GitHub workflow in here. Now, I'm not very familiar with, apart from what I've done here, I'm not overly familiar with GitHub Actions. I mean, this makes sense to me, but there'll be other things that I'm probably going to have to Google and scratch my head over. I'm more familiar with GitLab, which does it in a totally different way. So I would like to think that if we go to, say, actions. So there's an API, and I'm assuming that is referencing the name of the here. So I think if we were to create a new one and call this API-client, right? So API-client, and then change the name to be API-client, then I would like to think that we get a second one down here. I don't know. I kind of hope that works. So then what I wouldn't mind doing is just checking this out. So we've got on changes to direction, we have API. I want to change that to be API client, and I want that output to be API client as well. And then we have the users here. So this is checking a path filter. So we want to have an ID of changes. I don't know whether that needs to be unique across workflows. I don't know. We'll find out. So yeah, filters, API client. So you can have it's an array of filters. So we want to check for anything in API client. So any files that get changed here, in here, we want to spark this off. So scroll. So we want to run some tests. So if needs change direct detection, which is up here. If this outputs API, which is now going to be API client, is equal to true. There we go. Then we want to run it on Ubuntu latest, and of course this is all PHP stuff, so we want to remove all of this stuff, apart from maybe I remove all that. I want to remove this. I guess what we could do is try and do an npm. I don't know if this is going to work, but we could try and do an npm install in API client. So this is install npm packages instead of Composer, obviously. So thinning that out. Okay, and then what we have here is after the test. So after this, so it needs tests. We run on Ubuntu latest. If success, only run when all tests have passed. If success, then it outputs steps, set output, outputs success. That's what we get here. Now this may need to change because it's the same on the other workflow, but we'll see. So it's going to, if it's succeeded, it's going to return successful. And then we have a dummy step down here. So if the API client was not changed, then we set the API output of the API client to false. And then we have, we set that success message again, which is the same as this one. And then we have set outputs, and we set that too. And then scrolling down in even further, I don't know why that's on 2004, but we can change that later. So this is the CI API. I'm going to change that to be API underscore client because I want to make this unique. This here is always going to run. It needs the tests, after test, and the dummy step. And this is going to be checking whether or not we have either the tests have succeeded or if the dummy step has succeeded. And the reason why I have the dummy step in there is if there wasn't any change. So if there wasn't any change, then we set this to succeed. Otherwise, we're going to get some problems with the flow. Right. So then if passed, so that's the variable that we set here. So if it's the tests have passed, and if the dummy step has, or if the dummy steps have passed, that's an or, not an and. So if the tests have passed, or if the dummy step has passed, that gets set to true. So if is true, then we say tests have passed, else we run tests have failed. So fingers crossed. Let me just look through all this. Let's just do a quick find, because the thing that I changed here is API. So anywhere that doesn't have API dash, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's okay. So I guess what we can try and do is get this to run. I suppose the most important thing here is to ensure that this is running, checking for all of that stuff. That's good. And then it's going to dive into the API client, which is here, and then it's going to run. Actually, it's not npm, is it? It's yarn install. It's not npm, it's yarn install. Okay. I think we might be good to actually fire this through and just see what happens. So it's going to run on a pull, right? So on a pull request, it's going to run here. So I need to set this up as a pull request. So, whoops, sorry, there we go. So git status, we should only have that file changed. So git commit -am, and I've changed the way in which in the contribution guidelines, I'll just see that because I need to remind myself. I've changed the contribution guidelines to say how I prefer these commits to come through down here. So it's issue ID and then a descriptive commit message. So like for instance here, the reason why is that having a hash in the hash and then the issue ID in GitHub at least gives you a link to the issue that you're resolving. So if I was to come into here, we can see that we have, like, we can click on these links and it will tell you the what it is that refers to in terms of the ticket, which is very helpful, very useful. So anyway, so it's no longer the brackets, it's now hash, and this is 67. So this is adding the API client GitHub actions workflow, and let's just see what happens. I have no idea if this is going to work. No idea at all if this is going to be the thing that I want it to be. Whether I need to change the other one, I don't know. You can but try. So there we go, that's being pushed up. So what I'm going to have to do, here we go, we can see it. We're going to have to create a pull request for this. And I will, so in here we need to have, whoopsie, sorry. In here we need to have fixes 60, was it 65 or was it 67? 67, I think it was. There we go, 67, fixes 67. Another thing that I've put into the guidelines is that I would like people to, that should be commented out. So it just gives you a list of the things that it fixes, right? I think this will probably work through this quite a bit, because I've got a feeling that this isn't just suddenly going to work. I'm going to have to work through it, right? So we'll create a pull request and we'll just see what happens. So at some point I'm probably going to have to update all this. So here we go. We've got, right, so we can see that it's running two of these things. So we got the API and we got the API client. Just waiting. Okay, so this check has started and this check is has started as well. Okay, that's interesting. So if we were to have a look at this one, so if we go details, right? So these are the jobs for the API. So it's setting up the job first. It's then running the path filter. It's then completing the job because the filter API is set to false because we haven't changed anything in the API. So what we do is we set the output and mark that as completed. So we haven't done any tests because there's no need to do any tests because none of the PHP stuff was changed in the API. So in theory, we should see have a similar story for the other action, or the other workflow, I should say. So if we scroll down here, where we've got, so that's all API. So if we have a look at this one, API client, so let's load that up. So yeah, it's a similar deal. In fact, I'll probably be able to show you better. There we go. So we've got the API and API client. So if I click on API, that's all API stuff, and API client, that's the API client stuff. So we can see that ran here. Is there a way to visually see this better? That's just going to go to the, here we go. This gives you a better understanding, I think, of what's just happened. So we have the change detection job. Because there's nothing in the API client that has changed, we don't do any tests. So we go straight to the dummy test. dummy step, sorry, and then that marks that as succeeded, and then goes straight to the CLI API client. So that flow is okay. It's a little bit convoluted, but it works. One thing I would like to do now, and I don't know if this is possible at all, I have no idea, I would like to branch this out even further. So where we have the API and the API client, I would only like the API to run when the API is changed, and I would only like the API client to run when the API client has changed. So if I go back to pull requests and have a look at this one here, scroll. So ideally, I don't want any of these to run. Well, I only want the API client to run if the API client has changed, and I only want the API to run if the API has changed. The thing is, though, I don't know how to do that. And I guess you need to run the change detection for both of them to actually work out whether any change has actually done anything. However, I'm wondering if there's an on job here, or an on command here. I'm wondering if we can do a pull request, and I wonder if we can give a path to something here. So let me just, I'm gonna have to do a little bit Googling. You'll have to excuse me whilst I show my stupidity here and get to Google. So what are we looking for? We are looking for, actually thinking about it, there is, I have referenced this block. Let's just see that, because this may have some insights into how to do that. So let's just load that up. Because Bruno here, he's written a really good piece on how to do this step by step. This is what I was considering, right? So on pull request, paths to ignore. So I'm wondering if we need to ignore from the API client. I wonder if we need to ignore the API, and I wonder if from the API we need to ignore the API client, if that makes sense. There's paths to ignore. I wonder if there's paths to include. I don't know. I have no idea. But you can see this documentation here goes through what I've just explained, you know, in terms of these. He does these in shards because he's got a matrix strategy here. So things run, you know, concurrently. I think that's the right word. Yeah. But and then you've got he's got multiple filters and stuff. So he's actually checking the workflow itself. That's a good idea. Right. He mentions the reasons behind perhaps not using like a all-in-one workflow. Yeah, and then having it cut up by services. Is there any kind of documentation I can find on this on pull request? That's the on action, right? So if we did, let's do GitHub action on pull request, events that trigger workflows. So on branch protection rule, types created, deleted, check run, created, no. Do we have pull underscore request? There we go. Pull request. Assigned, removed. Just I'm trying to see if I can find what was it he mentioned. It was something to do with ignore. Let's just see if I can look that up. Paths ignore. Another thing that I find a little confusing with the GitHub actions is the fact that there is some underscores and there is some hyphens, and it just screws me up a bit in terms of like trying to work out when to use it. Like for example, runs on. Like why is that hyphenated? And why is that got an underscore there? There must be some reason anyway. That's just my it doesn't help. I'm dyslexic, and it doesn't help when I'm just looking at this and it just comes into my brain as a jumbled mess, and I'm like, right, here we go. You can use paths, or you can use paths or paths ignore to filter to configure your workflow to run when a pull request changes specific files. For more information, see workflow syntax for GitHub Actions. That is interesting. So you could actually just declare, you got an example there. So you got paths. What's the difference between pull request target? I don't understand. I don't know. Pull request target branch. Oh, is that the target of the pull request? That would make sense, wouldn't it? Let's try this. This might work. Let's try paths. So this would be this here would be paths, and this path would be an array, I guess, and the array would have API client, like that, I suppose. Do we have an example? Right, so like that, but obviously API client, right? I still want this I still want these to run because there's going to be other things, perhaps, like there might be some, I might want different steps if there's something within the API client. Like, for example, at the minute it's just installing npm, right? That's all it's doing, and there probably needs to be a build step between the changes step and the test step. But anyway, I still want to break this out into a separate thing because there might be some other bits and pieces that I want to do in terms of, say, checking the README files or other bits and pieces that aren't related to actually running ESLint or anything like that. Okay, so I think that's an interesting. They've put that. I'm going to put that in quotes. That's an interesting set, that. And I guess I should do the same for the API as well. So this would be API, anything in the API, right? Okay. Now, I will also add the workflow rules as well. So where this Bruno has mentioned that we've got like here. So I'll add that too. Obviously we need to change it to be ours. So on pull request, this is for the API. So this would be API. And the one up there would be API client. Now, obviously, they've both changed, so I would expect both things to fire off. Client, I think come on, spelling that right. Okay, so they've both been set up. That's API client. API client. The workflows have been added as well, so that's running off of API client, which is that one. And this one is running off of the API. So yeah, let's see if we can push this up and see. Let's first of all, it's always good to just check what files you've played with, these two. So git commit -am. We'll do #67 again. And we'll say adding pull request rules to API and API client workflows. Now, I would imagine that both of these are going to fire off now, but what I'll do is I'll change one of them, or I'll change one thing in the API and one thing in the API client, and just see if we can get them to run independently. So that's now being pushed up. So if we go back to here, so there we go. Right. So no unresolved conversations, merges this block, blah, blah, blah. It hasn't, yeah. So that's been added, but we can see that nothing has actually, ooh, that's weird. I was hoping that it would fire off. No, that is wrong. That is wrong. That should have, because the workflows have changed. So that should have fired off, right? Yeah. If we go to actions, we only have one in there. That's look, silly me. I'm calling this Y without the A. I'm YAML. And this is a copy and paste error. I bet this Bruno's just added it with, no, they have. So yes, he's added a YAML, spelt that correctly, and I am not spelling my YAML files correctly, or well, you know, I should be spelling them like that, really, keeping it nice and consistent. I have this thing where if there's like a chance for me to use the full word, I will try and do so. It helps with me to visualize it. Like I said, I can't, you know, sometimes when I snap read things, if there's more characters in there, then that helps me. So I try and go for YAML with an A, and I try and go for integer, and I try and do Boolean rather than int and bool. Anyway, that was just my mistake. Let's try and push this up again. So if we did a git status and then did a git commit minus am, again, this is 67. This is renaming YAML files. Right, let's see what happens. Go back to here. Go back to the pull request. Go back to here. There we go. Scroll down. Yes, we can see they're fired. But they're both there. They're both there. So they're just waiting to run. So this should prove that is working. So this, I don't see any problems with this, like going through. It should just pass because it passed last time. Yes. Okay, that's great. That's great. So why is that not green? Just refresh the page. Yes, that's a green tick. Good. I just have to wait for it. Okay, so what I can do now to just try this out is let's play around with the API client and see if we can get well, we know the API works, so let's play around with the API. So it's anything within the API, this one, anything within the API folder, so anything in here fires this off, and I haven't limited it to a folder, which I will probably do eventually. But let's say, for example, we want to change the SRC. Let's pick one. Let's do an entity. I guess what I can do here is just put in a comment. So adding comment to test pipeline. Save that. In fact, we can go one step further, can't we? We can say that's questions. Is it quiz? One of these. Yeah, let's take that out. I'm going to take that out. Save. Git right. Git status. That's what we've done. Git commit -am, and we're going to say testing API pipeline. So what I'm seeing here, what I would expect here is that the API pipeline would run, but the API client pipeline won't run. That's what I'm expecting. That's what I'm hoping for. And I'm also hoping for a PHP stan error because I've taken the doc block off of here. That's what I'm hoping. So let's run this. Let's do a git push. Go back to the pipeline. No. Oh, yes, here we go. Right, so the API is running, but so is the API client. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. So the API, that's passed. Or maybe I just have to accept the fact that they are all going to run and I'm going to have a lot of jobs. I don't know. But anyway, we should see that the test of the API fail. So this one here has failed because, oh, it's failed because of the code sniffer. It hasn't even got to PHP stan. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, that's a shame. I was hoping to only run workflows. I was hoping to only run specific workflows. I was hoping that the API client just wouldn't run, unless it's picking up the history of all this. Ah, that might be it, right? So it might, yes. So it's picking up that there is change in the history of this, right? Because it's comparing this against main, of course. Yes, I'm trying to be too clever. So let's put all this back. Same with all that. Yeah, I'm trying to be too clever. Cool. Okay. Right, I'll push that back up again. So yeah, apologies for that. That was just me being silly. So it's going to run these two pipelines because there are changes to both of the things. So I need to merge this into the main before I actually run the tests. Yeah. All right. Fine. So we'll just let this go, and then I'll merge it in. So adding the API client GitHub Actions workflow is descriptive. The PR doesn't replicate anything. No, because I created that today. I have read the doc. Yes. The code is mine. Yes. All good things. Right. So yeah, that's all passed. That's all good. So I will merge it in. Sorry, that's the wrong. What was the wrong shortcut key? So this. I'll do this up here, don't I? Yep. Closes. 67. Confirm. Right, so that's now been merged in. So what we can do, bring out main, git pull, bring that down. So there we go. And then what we can do is run a test on the API and the API client individually and see if that worked. So what I'll do is I'll create a new task in here. I'll just say that that's done. I obviously need to test it. Sure, that's what we're doing here. So test the API. Or just test the GitHub pipelines. Assign it to myself. convert it to an issue, put it to the code quiz. It's not that, it's project setup. And it is API client and API. Right, I'll put in a little thing in here. So, check that the API client runs when API client is changed, and then I will copy this. Sorry, I'm seeing notifications on things. Check the API pipeline runs when API is changed. Right. So they're the two things that we'll do. We'll put these as checkboxes. Right. So 69 is our ticket. So git checkout -b 69 pipeline test. There we go. Right. So what we want to do is make a little change to, I might as well just do the same here, right? Do the thing, change this, hit save, go back to here, do a git in here, do a git commit, and this is no longer 69, it is no, sorry, no longer 67. Sorry, I had a brain fart then. It is 69. And we'll push that. Oh, yeah, of course. Push that up. And then we'll go to here and we will see, hopefully, that we have a new pull request coming in. And it fixes. Oh, I've done it again. I need to sort that shortcut key out. It really is annoying. Sorry, that one. Right, let's create this pull request. There we go. Right, so one has changed. Yes, that's correct, because the API has changed. Marvelous. And I've just thought I'm going to need to do a pull request for both the API and for the API client. So there we go. This should fail. This should fail, and I should be able to tidy it up, push it up, and then the API, just the API, should run, not the API client. So let's watch this crash and burn. There we go. PHP Stan is like, no, doesn't work. So let's put that back. I know I could have reverted and all that jazz, but I want to try and do this as methodically as possible. And also that's a pain in the ass. So, right, so now we should have this passing, and it should only, because it's comparing it and there's no change, yeah, okay. And there's no change, then to what's on main, then that's fine. Yeah, okay, that's good enough for me. I'll merge that in. Again, doesn't really do anything, but whatever. We're gonna create a new one specifically for the API client. I think this is kind of getting messy, isn't it? Because I have closed this down. Let's change this to be API. Let's change 69 to be test the GitHub API pipeline. There we go. And also change this to say ensure that the API client pipeline does not run. So they're the things that I've just done. We'll do the same. I wish there was a clone ticket thing here. We'll do the same, but for the API client this time. So yeah. So it is test API client. Now this actually does need to be in its own ticket because we haven't actually checked whether Yarn can install the things that we want it to install. So so checks that the API client pipeline runs when the API client is changed, and then ensure that the API pipeline does not run. Update. So convert that back to an issue, code quiz. I'm going to assign that to myself and then set the labels to be API this time. And the milestone is project setup. Cool. Okay. Right. So it's 71 now. So if we did git checkout of main, then do a git pull, and then do a git checkout. I really need to create like an alias or something for this, don't I? 71, and then test API client pipeline. There we go. Right then. So the plan is to change something in the API client and then have it build the things. So I'm gonna just change one of these things. I'm gonna just change I'm gonna just change the README. Well, no, let's just change some TypeScript. Let's just put in a blank space here. All right, and put in some, not there. Put in a comment up here. Quiz DTOs. There we go. I mean, I'll remove it, but so this should now fire off. There we go. Git commit -am. What's this? 71. Get the right shortcut key. Git 71. So adding comment. Right, we'll push this up. In theory, this shouldn't run the API pipeline. This should run the API client pipeline. That's the plan, right? That is the goal here. So if we go back to this and go back to the pull request and then create a pull request, say that this fixes. Oh, I've done it again. Say that this fixes 71. I can tell I don't use this keyboard on a daily basis. Then create the pull request. Right, here we go. So we'll give it a bit of time. There we go. API client is running, not the API. So yes, this is exactly what we want. We haven't ran this yet, so let's go and actually see what's going on. So it's setting up the job. It's checking the paths. API client has changed. So it's now running the tests. This is where it's probably going to fall flat on its ass because we haven't ran it yet. I don't actually know if the no, it's doing npm. Okay, maybe I need to be a bit more optimistic. Yeah, there we go. It's doing all those. Oh, I'm chuffed. This is great. It skipped the dummy step because the there is change, and now it's doing the after step, after tests. I mean, the tests is just a build at the minute. It's just a build step. Now it's doing the API client final thing. That should now say that it's succeeded. It has. And there we go. So if we go back to the the pull request, adding comment, this should have passed. And it should, yes, only the API client has passed. So we've managed to create, this is really cool. I'm so glad that I've managed to do this. We've managed to create two pipelines in this mono repo for the API and for the API client. One for the API, one for the API client. And they only fire off if the files in those directories are actually have actually changed. Oh, I'm super pleased. I'm really chuffed because now we can move on to the fun stuff and actually start installing things in various different places. And this gives me confidence when people do pull requests that things are going to run in the right order at the right times. So what we need to do is I'm just gonna revert this and save it, and then I'm just gonna push this up again. We're just gonna push that. That's fine. And I know I could have just, I'm not that. I do like the comments and I do like the links, but I'm not overly precious with the history. I know I should. But for this, it's just a test. It's just a test. Right. So again, because it's the same as what it's on main, there's no need to do anything. So I could have just closed this down, but whatever. I know there's people probably screaming at me. What are you doing? You're just putting in noise, which I suppose is right. I didn't mark this as closed, did I? So I should do closes 71. There we go. So if we go back to our, it's now closed. That's done. That's really clever. I'm super chuffed with all of this stuff. Okay, so what we got? 1853. I don't think I'm gonna have enough time to deal with any of these, but what we can do is start looking at creating more tickets, I guess, because I mean this project is huge. The more I think about it, the more this project has legs. And I've got to try and come up with an MVP, which is something that we can all do in October for the Hacktoberfest. And I want to get more tickets that have the help wanted and good first issue. So I want to try and build up some of this stuff. So if we think about it, we have these three things. We've got the API, which is the Symfony application. We've got the API client, which is this TypeScript thing, which uses the JSON server for testing. It has a mock API in here, and we have the app, which is empty. And the app is going to probably be first of all a website, and then it's going to be maybe a mobile application. And I'm thinking of doing this in React. But I think maybe we should do this after we do the API client and the API. I think this probably should be the last thing that we do. So let's think about the API, because this is the engine room, the back end of it all. What do we need to do for this to get this to work? And I've been doing the API on Twitch. And I've been doing the API client on YouTube. So the API, what do we need to do? Where's this? So we've got, so this is all API client stuff. Probably this is best because I can see see the tags. We need to tag that. That's tagged with API. So that, yeah, that's correct. So Vagrant isn't probably the highest priority right now. It doesn't work on x86 boxes. I've got it running off of my Mac Mini, but there's a problem with the Vagrant box. But you don't need to use Vagrant for this to run. This is just a nicety to put this in a virtual machine. So I don't know whether I'll get around to fixing that or just not bother using Vagrant. I don't know. Create the environment variable to store the port. That's related to Vagrant. Add the ability to use .env files. This would be on the API client, right? So I haven't put any description in here. That's it's stupid of me. Let's build upon that. So what do we need to do to use env files in our API client? There is a package that we need to install. So let's just put in to do. There is a package that needs to be installed, which is I was going to go straight to packages then, but that's PHP land. What am I looking for? npm js.com. It is. Well, go there. env paths, env plus, new generator of env loader, decorator for env based configurations, get paths for storing things like data config cache. Let's see, npm .env file. .env, that's what I was looking for. .env is a zero dependency module that loads environment variables from a .env file. This is what we're after. So we will put that into here, into the to-do. So install this. Let's just put in a little bit of a description. So add the ability. Is that right? I hate that word. Too many I's, too many T's and an L, and it just turns into one mushy thing. Add the ability to use .env files to the API client. Yeah. So install that, then create a env file. Create a .env. I'm going to call it .env sample file. And can I create with the following. So in here I would like to have something like API underscore version, because we want to version this API. So this is going to be going to be the custom one, right? So we're going to have API version is equal to change me, and then we're going to have another one. So API version, we're going to have API base path, which is also going to be change me, because we'll set this up in the sample. I think for now that is going to be correct. I think. Ow. Yeah, I think that's correct. I think for now that's what. The reason why I want an env file is because I want to have the ability to have a testing server and change the base path and maybe we should just call this yeah, we'll call it base path. Yeah. So here we want a sample file, and in that sample file we want the API version to be v1, and we want to have the base path to be HTTP, and it's going to be local host running off of port 3000. Yep. I think that's right. I think that's what we need to do. Let's preview that. So create a .env file with the following: change me, create, and then what we need to do is we need to update the README file. Update the README file, and we'll put a link to that. Now I can't remember what it would be. It would be the README file for the API client. README, I think that's right. .md. Update the README file with a guide. Well, update the installation guide. There we go. Update the install guide. Update to explain how. Doesn't make sense. Update the install guide with a section on how to change the on how to create the .env. I'll put this in quotes. .env file. We also need to have another one in here. So let's do install, update the install guide. We'll put that, update the install guide. Update the API client install guide. There we go. So this is going to be API. I don't know if this path is right. We'll check it in a minute. .md. MD. There we go. Let's get rid of this. Right, on how to create a .env file. I also want to have another one in here. So we have update the API client. Update the .git ignore file in the API client, and ignore the .env file, because this is going to be custom, and this sample is going to be the sample that you use. So update the API install guide with a section on how to copy the .env .sample How have I spelt that? It is sample. How to copy the copy the .env to a new .env file and make the required changes. There we go. Now obviously none of this works, right? If this was to be installed and if this was to be changed, there isn't anything to test this because there isn't anything to test this because we haven't installed Axios. I think that's the way it's pronounced. So that we'll be doing that probably next week. So if anybody wants to jump on and do this, then please do. There's no harm in getting it done now. So install npm.env. This is on the API client. Update the gitignore file in the API client and ignore the .env file. Create an env file. I should specify that I want this in the API client, right? In the root directory. So create a .env file in the API client root with the following. And then again, we want to create the sample file in the API client root and ignore it. So we want this. Actually, hang on a minute. Do we want to ignore it? Do we want to create it if we're gonna? No, we don't want to create it, you fool. We don't want to create it. Create a .env sample file. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Right, update the install. Yeah, that makes more sense. So create a create a .env sample file in the API client root with the following. There we go. Okay. Update the API client install guide with a section on how to copy the .env sample to a new .env file and make the required changes. Yeah. Okay, right. Let's just see. Does that go to the right place? That should take me to a README file. Nope, it's not found. That's just taking me to issues. Oh, maybe I have to actually supply the whole thing. I probably do, don't I? HTTPS. Let me get the URL. That's what I'm after. Probably does need to be what's the word I'm looking for? Absolute. There we go. Right. So preview that. Does that go to the right place now? No. Oh, you idiot. That needs to go to API-client, doesn't it? API-client. Right, let's try that again. How many tabs can one man have? Oh my god. Right, hang on a minute. Hold the phone. Let's go to it. So this is in API client and it's README. This is what we want. It's on main. Okay, fine. Blob. Of course it is. Right. Now, does this work? Yay, it does. So yeah, in the install guide, it's just a section in here that just says copy over the file to do the thing. Right, that's great. These aren't in our lovely little formatting, so I don't know why. With the following 1, 2. Does that look better now? Yeah, it does. Cool. Okay. There we go. Right, have at it. That's cool. Okay, time. Okay, got a couple of more minutes. So we have add the ability. That's what we've just done. This here is a weird one. This one here has. I kind of want to remove this portion and replace it with this as an import, but that doesn't work. I don't know why. Create quiz list API endpoint. So these can't really happen until yeah. So this can't happen until so this is blocked. Is there a blocked? You know, like there's closes and stuff. Is there a blocked by or something? Blocked. I've done it again, you idiot. Sorry. Blocked. And it is the API platform. Can we have blocked by or something? Let's have a look. I don't know. GitHub block issues. Blocking issues. Here we go. GitHub action. Oh, right. It's an action. I'm not disabling issues. Disabling issues on GitHub. Support issue dependencies. For issues that are blocked, it creates a comment showing all issues that are blocking it. Hey? Okay, maybe that. Maybe this. Right. When triggered by an open source PR, checks blocking issues. Oh, this is another action. What does blocking in GitHub do? A new feature that allows projects owners to block. Oh, no, that's blocking users. I don't want that. I don't want to block anything. Any user. I want to. Let's have a look at this. This was back in 2014. I don't understand why this change cannot be made. Is there a bot to emulate that by comment commands? I don't know. I'm looking for like a simple workaround, but okay. What I'll do is just leave a comment, just say blocked by. I don't know if this is gonna comment that. Yeah, blocked by 6, which is the install platform. But it still allows people to jump on it and use it and do it, but you can't because we need to have the that's just editing the title. I guess what I can do is assign that to myself to ensure that nobody jumps on it. I guess. Transfer issue, delete issue. Fine. Okay, that whatever, that's fine. I'll leave that as is for now. What else have we got? Install API platform. That's something that I need to do. Create a JSON for existing questions. So this here is something that there is a pull request for it. But it's only this is going to get superseded eventually. This is going to be superseded by the PHP fixtures, so that will go, and that is assigned to me, isn't it? That's great. Cool. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to grab some dinner, and then I'll think about other issues. I'm sure I'll put some more out tonight with that. I'll have a little think as well as to the project going forward and like the next sort of steps. I've created milestones, so I've got like API setup and project setup. So we've been doing mostly the project setup. Things like building the API endpoints, that will be the API setup after the project has been set up. So there'll be things like installing a React app, maybe. There'll be things like updating the README. I also want to look at perhaps building a wiki page for this, where I can reference the wiki pages from the README file, because obviously this is a mono repo, right? So we have the main README file, which is mostly how to install the API, because that's basically the only thing that is actually functional at the minute, apart from the API client. There is a section down here about the API client, but then it jumps off to the API client README. So I don't know whether to have separate README files for these separate projects. So like a README file for the API client, the API, and the app. I'm not sure. Or whether to have a wiki page and then a wiki sort of area, and then have like this README file just link to certain pages. That might be easier to do rather than have a README file for each one of these things. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure yet about that, because it's a bit nested, isn't it? Whereas when it's all in the wiki, it's just in one place, and then you could have, you know, a sidebar and all of this stuff. So I need to think about that, but that's kind of like stuff for the future, I guess. I'll just try and get this to work, I guess. Anyway, we've done some really good stuff today. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. I'm going to shoot off. And yeah, like I said, there'll be more tickets coming shortly. Take care, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.